Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to, well, help you cut through the noise and get straight to the important insights from information you care about.
And if you've got an interest in religious studies, you're definitely in the right place for this one.
Yeah, we've really dug into a whole stack of sources, articles, research, notes, you name it, all looking at the global spread of religions, how things are changing today, and, what the future might hold based on projections.
Absolutely. And our mission here is basically to unpack all of that for you. We want to pull out the key takeaways, the things that might surprise you, and just help you get a clearer picture of this really complex landscape of world religions, all based on what's in this material.
Think of it as your shortcut to getting up to speed.
Exactly.
Okay, so where do we start? I guess the sources lay down a foundation right away, distinguishing between two main types of religion based on how they spread.
Right. You've got what they call universalizing religions. These are the ones that, well, aim for global appeal. Think Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. They're actively looking for converts. Doesn't matter where you live or what your background is.
And the other type?
That's ethnic religions. These are usually tied much more closely to a specific group of people, often in a particular place. Judaism, Hinduism, lots of folk traditions fall into this category.
Makes sense. And the numbers really show that split, don't they? The sources say about, 26% of people globally practice an ethnic religion?
Yeah, around that figure. So the vast majority are either part of those big universalizing faiths or actually identify as non-religious.
Okay, so digging into the numbers for the big universalizing ones, Christianity comes in first, right? Something like 2.1 billion adherents based on the data they used.
That's right. Then Islam at about 1.5 billion and Buddhism around 376 million. Those are the really big ones.
But it's not just them. The sources also highlight the non-religious group that's pretty substantial globally, about 16%.
And Hinduism, even though often categorized with ethnic religions due to its strong ties to India, is huge, 13.1%.
And then you add in Chinese ethnic religions at 5.7% and African ethnic religions at 5.9%. It really shows the scale of those more place-based faiths, too.
Definitely. And the world map they included, it paints a really vivid picture of where these groups are concentrated. You see these broad continental patterns right away.
Yeah, it's striking. Let's maybe zoom in on Christianity for a second, because the sources really break that down. They talk about three main branches.
They do. Roman Catholic is the largest chunk, about 51% of all Christians worldwide. Then you have Protestants at 24% and Orthodox at 11%.
And geographically, especially looking at Europe, those branches have pretty clear zones. Roman Catholicism is dominant in the southwest and parts of the east.
Right, while Protestantism is more northwestern Europe, and Orthodoxy is mainly eastern and southeastern Europe. Oh, and they mentioned the Church of England, specifically for the UK, of course.
The sources also made a point of mentioning the other smaller Christian traditions.
Right.
That makes up the last 14% or so.
Yeah, exactly. Groups like the Coptic Church in Egypt, the Ethiopian Church, the Armenian Church, Maronites in Lebanon, Assyrian and Chaldean churches. And they also list the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons.
So while they might be smaller globally, they represent these really distinct histories.
Absolutely. And the sources connect these current divisions back to big historical moments, which I think is helpful. Like the Byzantine Empire's rise and its role in the eventual split between Catholicism and Orthodoxy.
And the Protestant Reformation, obviously. That fundamentally reshaped the Christian world in the 16th century. Knowing that history helps make sense of the map today.
It really does. So how did these universalizing religions get so universal? The sources talk about diffusion.
Right. Like Buddhism started about 2,500 years ago with Siddhartha Gautama, where India and Nepal are now. Its core teachings, the Four Noble Truths about suffering and escape, were designed to apply to anyone, anywhere.
And for Christianity, they describe two key ways it spread. One is hierarchical diffusion.
Like top-down.
Exactly. Emperor Constantine embracing it is the classic example. It gets favored by the Roman Empire's elite, and then it sort of filters down.
Okay, and the other way?
Relocation diffusion. That's just people moving and taking their faith with them. Think early missionaries traveling those Roman roads and sea routes you mentioned earlier, bringing Christianity to new places.
Got it. And Islam. The sources tie its origins and spread really closely to specific places.
Very much so. The holiest locations are cities linked to the Prophet Muhammad. Makkah, or Mecca, his birthplace, is the holiest. It's got the Kaaba inside the huge Masjid al-Haram mosque.
And Medina, or Medina, is second, right? Where his tomb is.
Correct. And followers adhere to the 5 pillars, the basic beliefs, daily prayers, fasting during Ramadan, giving alms, and that pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj, if they're able.
The sources also bring up sacred places in other faiths, showing that link between belief and geography. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem is a huge one.
Yeah, sacred to both Jews and Muslims, a really complex, layered space.
And for Hinduism, being an ethnic religion, the land itself is often sacred. They mention Mount Kailas for Shiva, holy spots along rivers and coasts.
Especially the Ganges River. Bathing there is a key purification ritual. It really drives home how tied ethnic religions can be to a specific physical environment.
It's fascinating. And the sources threw in a few interesting facts too, like the tower for the Muslim call to prayer is a minaret.
And the place of worship is a mosque. Simple facts, but they add detail.
They also noted Hinduism doesn't have a single founder or origin point like the universalizing ones do.
Right. And that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all trace their origins back to Abraham. That's a key shared heritage.
Oh, and one more detail, cremation being more important than burial in Hinduism. Little things like that paint a richer picture.
Definitely. So that covers the sort of where and how it started. But the sources also dive into how religion's interacting with the world now.
Yeah, how it's dealing with modern pressures. They mentioned things like the rise of interfaith dialogue, trying to bridge gaps between different traditions.
And technology, that's a huge one. It offers new ways for people to express faith, build communities online.
But it also challenges the old ways, right?
Yeah.
Traditional authority, maybe even the need for physical gatherings sometimes.
For sure. It's a double-edged sword in many ways. We also see shifts in gender roles being discussed and debated within religious contexts.
Which often mirrors what's happening in wider society, leading to questions about leadership, interpretation.
Exactly. And youth engagement is another big theme. The sources note a trend of young people identifying as maybe spiritual, but not necessarily tied to a specific religious institution.
That's got to have big implications for established faiths down the line.
No doubt. But the sources also stress that religion isn't fading away as a force. It's still deeply involved in tackling global issues. Social justice, for one.
And environmentalism, increasingly. They specifically mentioned interpretations of religious teachings as a call for environmental care.
Yeah, Pope Francis's encyclical, Laudato Si', was cited as a major example of that within Catholicism, this idea of caring for our common home.
There was also a bit on religion and mental health, how beliefs can impact well-being.
Both positively, like through community support or finding meaning, but also potential conflicts, maybe with certain therapies, or the issue of stigma around mental health within some communities.
And, of course, religion and political activism, using faith as a basis for trying to influence policy or social change.
Right. From advocating specific laws to big social movements. They mentioned the civil rights movement historically, but also contemporary examples, while acknowledging, the ongoing debate about religion's role in politics.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. There was a specific study they highlighted about religion and fertility that seemed really interesting.
It was. What stood out was that it used 2002 survey data for both men and women looking at family growth. They were testing different ideas about why religious groups might have different birth rates.
Like maybe specific beliefs or just the kind of people in the group or being a minority, things like that.
Exactly. And the big finding, over time, the differences in fertility between religious groups seem to be shrinking. The gaps are getting smaller.
Okay, that's one takeaway. But wasn't there something about religiosity itself?
Yes, and this was maybe the most striking point. It wasn't just affiliation or how often people went to services. It was how important someone said religion was in their daily life. That showed a really significant positive link to fertility.
So the personal importance of belief mattered more than just attendance.
That's what this study suggested, yeah. More belief importance seemed correlated with higher fertility.
Huh. And did it matter if you were male or female?
Apparently not significantly, according to this research. The effect held for both men and women. It wasn't just about women's choices.
So what does that imply? Maybe it's less about specific religious rules saying have more kids and more about the social environment or the characteristics of people who hold strong beliefs.
That seems to be the direction the findings point, leaning towards what they called the characteristics hypothesis. The measure they used for belief was simply asking people how important religion was day to day.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, so let's take all that background and look forward. The sources get into these demographic projections looking out to 2050.
Right, and these aren't just wild guesses. They're based on modeling key demographic factors. Things like fertility rates, life expectancy, the age structure of different groups.
Plus migration and that tricky one, religious switching. People changing faiths or becoming unaffiliated.
Exactly. They pulled together a huge amount of data, thousands of censuses, surveys, population registers, though they do admit there are challenges, like getting good data from China or how to measure folk religions consistently.
Makes sense. So let's break down those drivers. Fertility rates first. Big differences there.
Huge. Muslims had the highest global rate at 3.1 children per woman in the baseline period. Christians next at 2.7, Hindus 2.4, Jews 2.3. All of those are above the replacement level of 2.1.
And below that level.
Folk religions were at 1.8, other religions and the unaffiliated both at 1.7, and Buddhists lowest at 1.6. And the projections have to account for how these rates might change, influenced by what's happening in big countries like India or China.
Then there's life expectancy. That varies too, largely based on where groups live.
Right. Jews had the highest at 80 years, partly due to concentration in countries with good health care. Muslims were around 67, Hindus 66, compared to a global average of 69 back then. Health geography matters.
And age structure, that's about growth potential, right? Younger groups grow faster.
Basically, yeah. If a group has a lot of young people, more are entering their childbearing years. They used Europe as an example in 2010. Muslims, Hindus, and the unaffiliated there were all significantly younger on average than Christians or the regional median age. That gives them built-in momentum.
Okay, then religious switching. That sounds complicated to model.
It is. They modeled it in 70 countries. People leave faiths, join others, become unaffiliated. Sometimes it cancels out, sometimes it drives big shifts. The projections suggest it'll contribute to Christians declining as a share in Europe and the unaffiliated growing in North America. But they're cautious, especially about places like China.
And finally, migration. That can really redraw the religious map.
Dramatically. The examples are clear. Take Europe. With migration, the Muslim share is projected to go from about 6% in 2010 to over 10% by 2050. Without migration, it would be closer to 8.5%.
So migration adds almost 2 percentage points just there.
Yeah. Same story for Hindus in North America. Migration nearly doubles their projected share compared to a no-migration scenario.
And the sources also mention flows, like Christians moving to North America and the Middle East, Hindus moving from Asia Pacific.
Right. And conversely, migration is expected to lower the share of Christians and the unaffiliated in Europe, people moving out as well as in.
Okay, so putting all those pieces together, fertility, mortality, age, switching, migration.
Right.
What's the big picture for 2050?
The most significant projected growth is for the Muslim population. Their share of the world total is expected to jump from around 23% to nearly 30%.
Wow, and Christians.
They're projected to grow in number, keeping pace roughly with world population growth, mainly thanks to high growth in sub-Saharan Africa. But their overall global share is expected to stay pretty stable, right around 31%.
What about the unaffiliated? That group was quite large.
Their share is actually projected to decline globally from 16% down to about 13%. Even though they might grow in some places like North America, globally, their lower fertility rates mean they shrink as a proportion.
And Buddhists.
Projected to decline both in absolute numbers and as a global share, down from about 7% to just over 5%.
Hindus.
Projected to grow in number and maintain a pretty stable share, around 15%. And folk religions will see shifts, with sub-Saharan Africa becoming home to a much larger proportion of the world's adherents.
So huge regional shifts underlying those global numbers. Sub-Saharan Africa becoming central for both Christianity and Islam.
Absolutely. And in the Asia-Pacific region, Muslims are projected to actually overtake Hindus as the largest religious group by 2050. That's a major change.
And Europe's changing mix, driven by migration and switching, as we discussed.
Plus, changes within countries. Some places with long-standing Christian majorities, like Australia, the UK, France, are projected to see that share dip below 50%.
The sources even listed the countries expected to have the biggest populations for certain groups, like the U.S., Brazil, Nigeria, China for Christians.
And China, Japan, U.S. for the unaffiliated. It gives a sense of where the numbers are concentrated. They also touched briefly on smaller groups like Baha'i, Jains, Sikhs, noting where they're mainly found.
And just methodologically, they mentioned making adjustments for things like undercounts or how to assign religion to infants, trying to make the projections as robust as possible.
Yeah, it's clear a lot of demographic modeling went into this. It paints a really dynamic picture.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a deep dive. We've covered the current distribution, the shifting dynamics in society, and these really quite striking projections for the future of world religions, all based on the material we reviewed.
And hopefully for you listening, especially with that interest in religious studies, it helps pull out the key insights from what can be pretty dense information. That's the goal here.
Absolutely. It's clear the global religious landscape isn't static at all. It's constantly being reshaped by history, but also by these powerful demographic forces, social changes,
Like,
technology.
it really is.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with, something to mull over from this deep dive. Given these massive projected shifts, where people live, how they practice, the changing role of institutions, how might the actual study of religion, the field of religious studies itself, need to adapt? How does it keep pace with this incredibly dynamic global reality that's unfolding over the next few decades?
That's a great question. It definitely gives us and you a lot to think about regarding the future focus of the field itself.